Shavua Tov. Today's daf is Kuf Hey. We'll start with the Mishnah on Kuf Dalid Amid Beis, which is the new parak, the 13th parak, Kol HaMenach Harei Alai. So we're talking about different kinds of Nedarim. We're talking about cases in which a person took a neder to bring a mincha, but he didn't specify exactly which mincha he would bring. For example, he says Harei Alai Isaron. And now we're going to discuss cases where he took a neder, but he didn't, let's say, specify exactly how much of the flour of the solis, the refined flour, he's going to bring. So if he says isaron, so then yavi echad. The word isaron is in the singular, implying one. The Gemara is going to say that's pshita. And then we have a case where he said isronos. And the minimum of a plural is always two, so therefore yavi shnayim. But now the Mishnah talks about cases where it's not clear exactly what his neder comprised. Peirashti, I did mention how many yisronos I have to bring, but eni yodea ma pirashti, I don't remember what exactly I specified. Is yavi shishim yisara. Now, the maximum, so that he could be certainly Yotze Midei Safek, would be if he brings 60, because more than 60 Yisronos you don't have in a mincha. If he says Harei Alai mincha, but he doesn't specify which mincha, then the Tanakama says Yavi Ezesh Yirtze. There are five different categories or types of menachos. He has to bring one of each of the five categories to be Yotze Midei Safek. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, no, Yavi minchas hasoles shehi miyuchedes shebemenachos. We assume that his neder was related to one particular kind of mincha, and that's all he has to bring. And what is that specific kind of mincha, to the exclusion of any others, that was included in his neder? That's going to be what's called the minchas hasoles, because it is unique on the entire scope of Menachos, and the Gemara is going to try to explain why this Minchas Soles is so unique. Now the Mishnah continues, if he took a neder of mincha or min ha-mincha, right, so the word mincha is in the singular, or he said min ha-mincha, it's one of the various types of menachos. So since he used the word mincha in the singular, therefore yavi achas. However, if he said the word menachos, which is in the plural, o min menachos, then yavi shtayim. So here he said in his neder he wants to bring a type of menachos, not a type of mincha. If it was just a type of mincha, he'd have to bring all five types. But here he only has to bring two, not five, because he said mincha. Or he said min, which is also in the singular. Peirashti, but if he says, you know what, I mentioned a particular type of mincha, but eni yodea ezem and pirash, I can't remember what specific category of mincha I vowed, then yavi chameshtan. He's going to have to bring all five categories of menachos in order to make sure that he certainly fulfilled his neder. So, for example, we have a minchas chavitin, a minchas solis, a minchas marcheshes, and then we have minchas mafer, which breaks down into chalos or rikikin. And he's going to have to bring one of each of those five categories. Another case is peirashti mincha shel esronim, and now he's using the word isaron in the plural. Eni yodea kam pirash, I don't know how much of ishishim isaron. So according to Tanakama, he's Yotze midei Safek by bringing a single mincha, made up, comprised of shisha misarom, because again, that's the maximum amount in a mincha. However, Rebbe disagrees, and Rebbe says, Yavi menachos shel esronos me echad v'ad shishim. He's going to have to bring the following. He's going to have to bring one mincha of one isaron, and then a second mincha of two isronos, and then a third mincha of three isronos, until he gets up to 60. So it means that we're going to assume that he needs 60 isronos, but more than that. Here's where Rebbe disagrees with Tanakama, and he says it's not enough that he brings 60 isronos in one mincha, but it could be that what he meant when he took his neder, of course he doesn't remember it now, but isronim he meant in different kalim, meaning that each keli should have an isaron of flour in it. The Mishnah continues. Oh, now the Gemara takes over, and the Gemara says, Pshita, why did you have to mention that if he says Isaron, he only brings one Isaron? And the Gemara answers, that's an introduction. Isronos Yavishtay Mitzvichle. So he needs to tell you that if he said Isronos in the plural, he brings two. So the Gemara says, Hanami Pshita, Miyud Isronos Shtayim Mitzvichle. In other words, why are you telling me that that if he said Isronos in the plural, he has to bring two Isronos? We know that the minimum amount of plural is two. So the Gemara answers that what? That Pirashti V'Yodei Ma Pirash. The whole Mishnah is really just an introduction to the cases of Suffolk where we're not sure what he meant. He doesn't remember exactly the nature of his neder. And the Mishnah says, Yavi Shishim Isara. Montana, who is the Tana that taught that he has to bring Shishim Isaron? Omer Chizkiya de Lo Kerebi. Although I cannot identify specifically the name of the Tana, but I can tell you it's not Rebbe. To E Rebbe, because Rebbe would hold, he said, Yavi Menachos shel esronos me echad v'ad shishim. It's not enough that he brings one mincha of 60 esronos, but he has to, as we said before, bring one and then another, many multiple numbers of menachos. All told, 60 menachos, and then we go from one isaron, and the second one would be two isronos, etc., etc. So again, just to summarize, according to Chizkiah, our Mishnah, the ratio of our Mishnah, could not be reconciled with Rebbe. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, Afil Tema Rebbe. Rabbi Yochanan has this challenge that he wants to square off this Mishnah even according to Rebbe. How so? The Omer, the case is, he said, Peirashti Esronos. That much I remember that I pledged Isronos in the plural. Avalo kvatim bekli. Right? I didn't establish whether or not this double isaron would be in one kli, or shall we divide it up into two kalim with one isaron in each kli, such that he has to bring two menachos. To maise shitin esronos b'shitin money. It's that case of lo kavatim bekli, where he said that, I leave it up in the air as to whether or not, he'll bring all these esronos in one mincha, meaning in one single kli, or he'll bring 60 different menachos in 60 different kalim. And that's the way Rebbe interpreted it, that we have to be worried, at least for the possibility that he meant to say, I'm going to bring 60 menachos in 60 different kalim, 60 separate menachos. So that Rebbe could be reconciled with our Mishnah, in a case where he indicates that what he specified was that there would be one mincha in one kli. He doesn't remember how many esronos will be in that one mincha. And here Rebbe could agree that all he has to bring is one mincha. Of course, it'll have to be comprised of 60 esronos to make sure there's yotzei yidei chovaso. And where does Rebbe disagree with the Tanakhama? That's in a case where perashti esronos avlo kavatim bekli. So he definitely has to bring 60 esronos, but are they 60 separate individual menachos in 60 kelim, or is it one mincha that comprised of 60? The Mishnah goes on, and the Gemara quotes that part of the Mishnah. Harei alai mincha yavi ezem and shirtza. If he took a mincha stam, then he has to bring one of the various five categories of menachos. Rabbi Yehuda, on the other hand, you recall, disagrees, and he says that there's something called a minchas solis, and that's the one he had in mind, was a minchas solis. Again, when I say he has in mind, I don't mean that literally. I mean, we're not doing you know, a study or, a dissection of what he has in his mind. But what do most people have in mind? Now, getting into the reasoning on the logic that underlies Rabbi Yehuda's shita that he brings in Minchas Soles, Tana we learned in the Brisa, Hoil upasap ha'kosav tchila, because the Torah opens up the parsha of Menachos with the Minchas Soles. Elamayata, so if that be the case, then Rabbi Yehuda should be consistent, and Harelai Ola Yavi Min HaBakar, right? He's got to bring a bull. Hoil upasap ha'kosav. In the Parsha of Ola, the first thing it says is Ben Bakar. And here we start the daf for today, Kufhei. Oh, we sorry, we still have to finish up here. Elamiata Haomer Hare Olai Ola Yavi Ben Bakar Whole possible Kasuv Tchila Tchila Minatzon Yavi Keves. Right, if a person takes an Ola Minatzon, he takes a neder to bring an Ola Minatzon, then he should have to bring a keves because whole possible cause of tchila, and therefore he would not be allowed to bring, let's say, mina izim. You'd have to bring mina kvasim. If on the other hand he took a vow mina oaf, yavi torim. Right, there are two categories of birds that lend themselves to carbon. There's torim and bnei yona. Well, according to Rabbi Yehuda's logic, if he's going to be consistent, he's got to bring torim. He doesn't have the option of bnei yona because since he didn't specify which fowl, therefore he's got to bring the one that's written first in the Torah. Whole possible cause of tchila. And yet, Alam Tanan, we find a Mishnah which Rabbi Yehuda apparently didn't disagree with. Harei alai ola yavi keves. So you see, he doesn't have to bring a Ben Bakar. And furthermore, Rabbi Lozman is Omer Tar O Ben Yona. He has a choice of bringing either a Tar or a Ben Yona, even though Tar is written first. Philo Polig Rabbi Yehuda didn't disagree. So therefore, Elamai Miuchedesh Menachos, we go back to the drawing board to explain the underlying reason of Rabbi Yehuda, why a person who says, I'll bring a mincha, and he doesn't specify, he brings his mincha soles, to Leslie Shem Levat. What's unique about mincha soles is that the Torah calls it a mincha. The Torah doesn't specify what kind of mincha is, right? It's not like minchas Maseches or minchas, all the other menachos that have a shem levai, meaning it's not just a mincha, but it's the following kind of mincha. And he points out that, for example, there's minchal machvas, minchas marcheshes, minchas mafi tanur. So now we have a new explanation that underlies Rabbi Yehuda's shita of bringing a mincha solus, and that is because ein lo shem levai. But the Gemara objects because for a Tana in the Brisa it says hoil possible kosav tchila. How are you going to fit that into the language of the Brisa that says that the reason for Rabbi Yehuda's preference for a mincha solus is because it's written first in the pasuk? Halchi kamer. Here's how we have to reinterpret it. Ezu mincha miuchedes shebe menachos. Maybe you won't remember Rabbi Yehuda's shita that a mincha miuchedes, the special distinct mincha amongst the menachos, is the mincha soles, and it's less beis shem levai, right? And the reason why it's distinctive is because the Torah doesn't add another adjectival phrase. Is zu shepasav kosav tchila. And now Rabbi Yehuda is giving you a memory device, and he's saying that you should know that the mincha, which doesn't have a shem levai, is the first mincha that's listed in the Torah. So Gemara asks Pshita mincha solos komer simon ba'alma. So Rabbi Yehuda very often, like the Tzach Hadash v'Achav, and many other cases where Rabbi Yehuda gives mnemonic devices, ways of remembering. So the best way of remembering that, according to Rabbi Yehuda, dafka mincha solis in an unspecified vow he has to bring. The best way of remembering that is zu sheposach kosav v'tchila, meaning that's first on the list the way the Torah presents the menachos, and that's minchas solis. The Mishnah goes on mincha mina mincha. If he says either I'm going to bring one single mincha or a type of a mincha, and it's always in the singular, so it's either this or that, then what's going to be here? He brings one mincha. Oh, that's a case of mina mincha. But if he says that I'm going to bring two menachos, or I will bring a type of menachos, again menachos in the plural, then he has to bring two menachos. Boirav Papa vacillated. Mine mincha ma. What if he takes a neder and he says, I'm going to bring mine mincha, various types of menachos? Kevan the Amamine, should we say that since he said what? He said mine menachos in the plural is tarti ka omar. He's going to bring two menachos. But yet it's a little bit strange because you're telling me he has to bring two menachos, but he said, he said a mincha in the singular. So the Gemara explains that tarti komar. Since he said types, he wants to bring mine mincha. That's a minimum of two. Tarti komar. Umay mincha. So why do you use the word mincha, meaning in the singular only one mincha? To kula menachas nami mincha mikarya. If you take the entire gamut of menachos, you can refer to them as mincha. So, but again, it's a little misleading that you might think that mincha in the singular means only one mincha, but rather we said it means kula menachos. V'chsiv, I'll give you a proof from the Bible itself. It says v'zos Torahs ha-mincha. So even though it's referring to all the different categories of menachos, yet the Torah uses this generic term mincha. And that's what he meant, this note there, again according to one side in the Gemara, when he said types of mincha. O Dilma, here's the other side in Rav Papa's Safek. Kevan di Omer mincha, since he clearly said mincha in the singular, chada mincha ka'omar. He only wants to bring one mincha. Umay mine mincha. So why did he say mine in the plural? Many types of menachos. Hachi kamar. Mi mine mincha chada mincha Allah. Meaning, what he meant to say was that there are various minim of menachos, and I'm going to bring one of those minim. Toshma, let's see if we can come to some conclusion about Rav Papa's suffix in the case of mine mincha. Our Mishnah says mincha min mincha. He takes upon himself a neder to bring a mincha or a min mincha. Yavi achas, he brings one mincha. So the Mishnah clearly holds that in the case where he has both min, etc., or mincha, then ham mine mincha shtayim. He only brings one because he said mincha or mine mincha in the singular. But if he says two menachos, then he has to bring two menachos. So Gemara says ema seifa, but you want to draw the conclusion that he has to bring two menachos, which was which side in Rav Papa was that, the first or the second? Uh, yeah, it was the first side in Rav Papa. But ema seifa, what are you going to do with the seifa? The seifa says menachos min menachos yavi shtayim. So, right, if he uses the plural, then he has to bring two. But again, it says they use the word menachos. What's the implication as far as mine mincha? Chada, he'd get away with only one mincha. Elamiha says the Gemara lekala mishma mine. In other words, from the Mishnah we can't derive anything. It's like the yukim sosrim. Toshma, maybe we could resolve our papa's suffix from a brisa. Min menachos olai. I'll bring a type of menachos. Yavi shtei menachos mi menechat. Right? He said one min, and he said menachos in the plural. So now let's be medayik from the brisa that ha mi mine mincha. Had he said not menachos in the plural, but one mincha, then chada you'd only have to bring one single mincha, and that would support the second side in Rav Papa's suffix, that even though he used the word menachos, but he's referring to all the menachos in a generic sense. Gemara rejects and says dilma ha mine mincha. He brings two menachos of one type, but if he said from amongst the various types of mincha, then maybe shtei menachos mishnei minim. So Gemara says, what do you mean? Shnei minachos mishnei minim? Lo tani hach. That's not what we learned in the Brisa. So the Brisa says min menachos alai is maybe shtei menachos mimin echad. However, mine menachos alai maybe shtei menachos b'shnei minim, mishnei minim. Now, what's the implication? Ha mine mincha chada. That it would seem from this brisa, from the Sefer of the brisa, that if he said types of mincha, then he brings only one mincha. Now, at this point, it seems that the Gemara comes to the final conclusion that if he took a neder with mine mincha, then he brings only one mincha. So the Gemara says, Dilma ha-mani Rabbi Shimoni. Oh, now we get back to Rav Shimon. Who remembers Rav Shimon from the case of what's called a minchas mafer, which could be either made of chalos, which are non-leavened, or made of rikikin on these wafers. And according to Rav Shimon, it's not either or, but he can make a combination thereof. So it could be 5 five chalos and five rikikin. So therefore, if according to Rabbi Shimon, a person takes a neder to bring a minchas mafe, he's allowed to bring half, meaning five chalos, and the other half, the other five, rikikin. And now we're going to interpret our Mishnah according to Rav Shimon. My mine mincha, right? On the one hand, he said mine in plural, and then on the other hand, he said mincha in singular. Mincha de ispe tarte mine, right? A mincha that has two minim in it, referring to both chalas and rikikin, meaning he can make a combo of five and five. Aval Rabbanan diamre, but Rabbanan rejected Rabbi Shimon and hold mechzeh chalas mechzeh rikikin loyav. There's no such thing as a combo. It's either all or nothing. All 10 chalos, all 10 rikikim. And therefore, if he took a neder to bring a minchas mafe, he can't bring half of them as chalos and half of them as rikikim. So therefore, when he used the word mine in the plural, and then he wants to bring one mincha, that can't work. Maybe shtei menachos bishnei min. Right? He'll put one min in one mincha and bring it as one mincha, and another min as another mincha. Now we go on to the Mishnah. Peirashti ve'eni yodeh ma pirashti yavi chaimshta. Has to bring all five categories of menachos. Mantana. Rabbi Yirmiyah delok Reb Shimon deik Reb Shimon. Kevan diyam mechza. We're going to have to jack up the number according to Reb Shimon because he says mechza chalas u'mechza rikikin yavi. So instead of five, we get six. Let me just double check that. Okay, I didn't find it, but I think I'm right. In other words, Minchas Mafen now subdivides into a third category. We had it only as two categories, right? We had the category of Chalos, and then we had the category of Rechkikin. Now we have, according to Rav Shimon, another additional category, namely half Chalos and half Rechkikin. So again, at this point, we've rejected the possibility of attributing the Mishnah to Rav Shimon, and the Gemara goes on and says, "Inami." Even if our Mishnah holds like Rabbi Yehuda the Omar Kol Menachos Bos Eser, which means we bring groups of 10 loaves for every Isaron of Soles, each Isaron that he gives as an Adov is brought as 10 loaves. Rabbi disagrees, he holds 12 loaves. Okay, fine. So we have that Rabbi Yehuda sheet of 10 loaves. Is Kol Menachos Bos Eser, equals Sfuki B'Arba'esrei Menachos. Right, so now we start calculating how many different menachos he'd have to bring in a low pirashti, in a pirashti, but I don't remember. So assuming the Tana of Mishnah would accept Rabbi Shimon, then he would have to bring a total of 14 menachos. Now, how do you get 14 menachos? He may have vowed to bring a mincha of soles or marcheshes or machvas, and these three possibilities, he's got to bring three karbanos, three menachos for each of these possibilities, and he may have to also bring a minchas mafer, which is chalas and rikikin. Now, on top of all that, he's got to bring an additional 11 menachos, because he might have had a neder to bring his mincha from chalas. He might have had it from rikikin. So therefore, to cover that possibility, he's got to bring two more menachos. Now the total is five. But he might also have taken a neder to bring a combination of chalas and rikikin, according to Reb Shimon. Now, there are a total number of 9 combinations of chalas or rikikim that he may have pledged. 1 rakik and 9 chalas, 2 rikikin and 8 chalas, 3 rikikin and 7 chalas, and so forth and so on, until 9 rikikin and 1 chala. So these 9 menachos, plus the 5 that we mentioned earlier, 5 and 9 is 14. 14 different menachos to be yotze b'dei safek. Abaye Omar, afilu temer Reb Shimon, I can reconcile our Mishnah with Reb Shimon, who says that you could bring a minchas mafer made up of 5 and 5. Shamina leila Reb Shimon di Omar, maisi umasni. I'm going to bring to you a brisa, which is going to prove that according to Reb Shimon, and we're going to deal with the laws of Nazir and Mitzorah, if he has a doubt as to the type of mincha he has to bring, then the number 5 is still correct. He says it's not necessary for the noder to bring 11 menachos, as we said before, to satisfy all the possible oven-baked menachos. Rather, it's sufficient for him to bring 2 menachos, one exclusively of chalos, the other exclusively of rikikin, and he makes the following tonight. If I took a neder to bring a mincha, which is composed entirely of rikikin, or alternatively require entirely of chalos, then that which I took as a neder is now being brought to satisfy that neder, and the other mincha is being brought as a voluntary mincha, minchas nedav. But if I vowed to bring a combination of rikikin and chalos, the chalos and rikikin combine to correspond to the requirements of my neder, the rest are offered as a nedava. Tisanya, where do we find this? In a brisa. Rabbi Shimon Omer, and now we're going to talk about the Mitzorah. First, let's mention the Nazir. The Nazir, he's not allowed to drink wine, cut his hair, or be metame himself to mesim. Now, if he's metame himself to a mess, he's got to start all over again from scratch. A Mitzorah, once he has Mitzoras, he had a Mitzoras and it was healed, he undergoes a process of tahara, and he has to bring various karbonos, and he's got to shave off his hair. So what's the law for a Nazir who's in doubt whether or not he had become a confirmed Mitzorah? We're combining now Nazir and Mitzorah together. Also, he's in doubt whether or not he had contracted Tumas Mes. So this is a complicated sugya in Masechta Nazir, But what's relevant for us here is that a Mitzvah is not allowed to eat kachim until he finished his entire process of tara. And at what point does his tara culminate? When he brings a korban asham together with a log of shemen. Okay. So now we say the following. Rabbi Shimon Omer lemachras, we'll see what the word lemachras means, maybe ashamo vilugo. So the word lemachros refers to the morning after the 60th day from the time his Nazirus has been healed.